Good day, everyone. This is Mark Vello, and you're listening to Headline News. Facebook blocked Australian news content. Australian Prime Minister, you don't run the world. The Australian government pushed for legislation requiring technology giant Google and Facebook to pay the media for news content, and Facebook stopped Australian users from sharing and viewing content on its platform on the 18th. This was unanimously condemned by all sectors in Australia. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Facebook's behavior was arrogant and disappointing, and Australia will not back down from it. The Australian government will introduce the News Media Bargaining Code to ensure that search engines and social media platforms displaying news content pay reasonable fees to the media outlets that create these stories. In an effort to resist the new law, at one point, Google spoke of withdrawing from the Australian market, and Facebook threatened to ban Australian users from sharing news on its platform. After the Australian government intervened, however, Google switched to an agreement with 3 mainstream media outlets, while Facebook began blocking news in the country. According to the Epoch Times, on the morning of the 18th, Australians found that the Facebook news pages of some mainstream media had been blocked, and the Facebook pages of some Australian government agencies were also blank, and even the health and epidemic prevention departments and firefighting units dealing with the epidemic were unable to announce important information. Facebook's actions were unanimously condemned by the Australian community. Prime Minister Morrison said in a Facebook post that Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia Today, cutting off essential information on health and emergency services, were as arrogant as they were disappointing. I am in regular contact with the leaders of other nations on these issues. These actions will only confirm the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies, who think they are bigger than governments, and that the rules should not apply to them. Morrison also stressed that Australia will not back down from this. His statement reads, "They may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean they run it. We will not be intimidated by big tech seeking to pressure our parliament as it votes on our important news media bargaining code." Australian Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt said he was deeply shocked that health organizations such as Bowel Cancer Australia and Kids Cancer Project have also been affected by the Facebook block. The fact that the Kids Cancer Project can be affected is frankly shameful. Facebook needs to fix it and deal with it immediately. In a press release, Australian federal MP Andrew Wilkie criticized that denying users access to timely and accurate news because Facebook doesn't want to share revenue with legitimate media outlets is nothing short of socially irresponsible. Australian Treasurer Josh Frydenberg also warned that Facebook's actions would damage its reputation in Australia. He also revealed that he had met earlier with Facebook founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who raised a number of remaining issues with the new media bill, and both sides agreed to continue dialogue to find a pathway forward. However, the Australian government's position is clear that it will continue to legislate the code. At noon on the 18th, the official Facebook pages of some Australian state health agencies returned to normal one after another. Bureau of Meteorology said the agency's Facebook page was restored at around 12:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Myanmar's largest demonstration in Yangon. After the military coup, the Myanmar military claimed that it would hold elections and hand over administration, but the Myanmar people did not believe it. On February 17th, tens of thousands of people launched the largest street protest since the military coup in Yangon, and traffic was completely paralyzed. Our objective is to hold an election and hand power to the winning party. Brigadier General Zaw Min Tun, spokesman for Myanmar's National Leadership Council, said at a press conference on February 16th. It was the first press conference held since the military staged a coup on the 1st. But the Myanmar military has been cutting off internet access, arresting journalists and dissidents, and running military vehicles and tanks through the streets in recent days. Myanmar people do not believe that the military will hand over power, and the people took to the streets of Yangon, the biggest city, and Mandalay, the second biggest city, on the 17th, to continue their protests against the military coup. As more people gather to protest in the commercial hub of Yangon, AFP reports that UN envoy Tom Andrews has warned that he has received information that military personnel are moving into Yangon from outside the country. In the past, such troop movements preceded killings, disappearances, and detentions on a mass scale. He said, "I am terrified that given the confluence of these two developments, planned mass protests and troops converging, we could be on the precipice of the military committing even greater crimes against the people of Myanmar." Andrews called on the international community to put pressure on the Myanmar generals, saying the military government's continued repression of the people of Myanmar's basic liberties and human rights must end immediately. But if the Burmese generals continue to resort to violence, he also called on foreign companies to sever ties with Myanmar to stop it. According to Andrews, he also heard the secret interrogation of Aung San Suu Kyi and ousted President U Win Mint had begun this week, and that the two were expected to appear on video during the interrogation on March the 1st. The state councillor of Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been detained since the first military coup and is facing charges of violating the natural disaster management law, in addition to the illegal import of 6 radios. This concludes tonight's broadcast. Thank you for your time, and stay tuned for the next Headline News.